Hello and welcome to another episode of a Candid Conversation with Adam Lopez. Today we have a very special edition. It's going to be the Law Workers' Comp edition, and I have two professionals that I had the pleasure of meeting early last year, and I'm talking about Andrew Trutanich and Gregory Grinberg. Gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for having us. I'm really glad we finally got to be able to put this together, because I know we've been talking about it for a couple months, and it just seemed like always our schedules always had something coming up. So I'm glad we were finally able to do it.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having us.
No, absolutely. I got to mention that obviously these two individuals represent Gale Sutow and Associates, and we're going to talk a lot about the firm in a little bit. But I just want to begin the conversation by asking, we thought the pandemic was going to be over soon, but now it seems like we're taking steps backwards, right? It seems like it's getting worse, it's getting more difficult, and I know all three of us are family men. We all have wives, we have children, and I will tell you that it's been tough. We actually were out sick for a week 2 weeks ago. We were home. It just seems surreal, and now it seems that it's getting everywhere again. How are you, gentlemen? Let's start with you, Andrew. How was your family doing?
We're doing really well, all things considered. But like you're saying, when I think back to like March of 2020, I could never in my wildest dreams think that we'd be sitting here in January of 2022, still going through, this pandemic. And it just seems like every time it starts to get, a little bit better. It looks like we're coming out of it a little bit. Then like a new phase starts, and we're just kind of like right back to where we started. But overall, we've been good. I mean, we've just like everybody else, just been, taking it one day at a time and navigating as best we can and learning how to do it.
Man, well, that's great. At least, you guys have been staying safe. That has not been the case for many families, especially recently. But how about you, Gregory? How are you guys doing up in Northern California?
Oh, we're faring okay. We're lucky in my family. We have three kids, so staying home, they had other kids, they had each other to play with. But at a certain point, we picked our kids up from school in March. And then, more than a year went by when the world just completely changed and we sprung it on them. And, it started out with, I think it was 15 days to stop the spread. And here we are 2 years later. And, we're all healthy and safe at the time, at least. But it's hard to tell them what to expect and what's coming next, because, I've got no idea. It's new every time.
And that's the reality, and it looks like it's ever changing every single day. And then the reason why we have Andrew and Gregory's, because although you're from the same firm, you represent pretty much Southern California and Northern California, and we know that it's definitely not the same playing field. You have different court systems, you have different counties, you have different cities, different ordinances, and we're going to get a little bit into that in a little bit. But I just have so many questions that I want to discuss with you guys, and I'll start with you, Andrew. Is pre-pandemic and now during the pandemic, how has, I guess, the industry been for the firm? Because now, you have to deal with so many different changes, especially when you're in workers' comp defense with your clients. So tell us about the transition from when it was prior and now during the pandemic.
I mean, sometimes it's in all aspects, not just in, as far as like our workers' comp system, working in the firm, but just like in regular life. It's hard to even like think back to how it was before, where you were just like, oh, wow, did I actually just go out and just live my life and not have to worry about anything?
Correct. Yeah.
But now, I mean, our the way we work has changed in so many ways. I mean, pre-pandemic, so like I'll give you my situation, for example. Sure. Like you said, I work in Southern California. Our office at that time was in downtown Long Beach. I mainly handled cases throughout Orange County, Inland Empire, in San Diego. So in each of those regions, there's a number of different courts. So like, say, Long Beach, Santa Ana, Anaheim, Pomona, Riverside, San Bernardino, San Diego. I would have, my caseload, I would have to drive to each one of those courts depending on what I had to do for the day, what was on calendar for that day. So I'd be driving all over the place, going to all these different courts, handling the cases. As soon as the pandemic started, everything went remote, and it still is now. It's been remote for 2 years now. And we are partially on like a telephonic court system where we call in, we have our court hearings telephonically. And then if we have to do a trial, we do it by video. We started, I think, Greg, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think somewhere around October of 2020, they said that we were going to start going back in person to hearings for at least, certain types of hearings, while, some of the more minor type hearings were still held telephonically. And then Omicron came and they just reeled that back in. And actually earlier, I think last week, they just said, okay, everything's going remote now 100% again. So we're kind of, like right now we're on Zoom.
Yeah.
I do everything on Zoom. I do depositions on Zoom. I do meetings with my clients on Zoom. I do meetings with my law firm on Zoom. Before this pandemic, I don't know that I ever actually was ever on Zoom before. So
that is true.
I'm on it constantly.
So Gregory, beside being maybe more convenient now, because you can do it remotely and you have the flexibility, is it really effective? When you have those hard cases or hard claims where you really have to defend and dig deep, how effective is it really having to have depositions or trials remotely? Tell us a little bit about that.
I think for me, at least, it is. For me, I found it very effective because for one thing, it's easier. If you need the deposition to be video recorded, it's not that hard to do, and it's not that much of a hassle because it's built into the system. We're recording right now. It's also been effective in the sense that the trying to herd together the injured worker sometimes to get them to locations so that you can depose them and get the court reporter and interpreter, everybody on the spot at once. I had cases pre-pandemic where we couldn't get either the court reporter and the interpreter to show up at the right time, and the deposition kept getting kicked over. Whereas now, because it's not in person, it's so much easier. The court reporter doesn't have to take a deposition, in Monterey in the morning and Santa Rosa in the afternoon. So we get a lot more done. We don't spend as much time driving to and from every place. So that time we're still working. We're just using that time effectively. Instead of driving, we're drafting our pleadings, reviewing records, whatever we need to do. And I think in terms of access to the workers' comp system, and obviously I'm going to be biased in favor of the defense and the employment, but just practically speaking, in terms of injured workers getting access to their attorneys, getting access to hearings, getting their cases moving along faster, this is a big boon, and they can do this safely. Some injured workers are young and healthy, and some injured workers are not, and they're when they take the public transit system to get to court, they're getting exposed, and they have to risk that just to get their benefits.
Wow. So I guess that there's benefits, positives, and some negatives, but not as much as it seems. But here's the next question, though. When all this is said and done, hopefully soon, right? The pandemic is hopefully over, soon. Is there any aspect of the whole remote now approach that you think might stay permanently? Because there's many companies, a lot of colleagues that I know, that they have permanently closed the offices because they felt that working remotely is as effective as being in the office. So now they don't have the cost of the lease of a building, et cetera, et cetera. But the laws, obviously, the industry is different. It has to be more, I would think, in person. But is there anything you think might stay permanently after the pandemic?
Well, I would just say, I think as far as like the court system, a lot of these hearings, we've discovered through this pandemic, since we've been doing the court remotely, that a lot of these hearings, don't really need to be in person.
Interesting.
And it kind of like, so pre-pandemic, when you would go to the court, a lot of people have different ideas about what a courtroom looks like. And, when you're practicing in administrative court, let me back up. So I used to practice in Superior Court before I started doing, workers' comp. And there, you have like more of like what people would recognize as like a courtroom where you go in there and there's like a big bench and the judge is up there and there's a jury box, there's like the bar and the gallery. And then when you get to workers' comp and it's an administrative court, it's really like a small office room, except you have like 40 people crammed in there, all trying to get their cases heard, with the judge who's basically just sitting in the front of the room with the desk. You could barely move in there. There's like a million people that are having a million different conversations, and it's just not functional a lot of time.
Correct.
You have attorneys that maybe they have a bunch of different things on calendar in the same courthouse, but a bunch of different courtrooms. So they're running all over the place. You're trying to track them down as a defense attorney because you're trying to get your case disposed and disposed of, and you can't find somebody. You're trying to get this business done, and it's just chaos in a lot of ways. And I think that a lot of those less significant hearings, like maybe some of the status conferences, maybe some of the lien conferences, can be held remotely still, and would alleviate some of the pressure of just like having that many people in that small space all at one time. I can see that happening. I would definitely be in favor of something like that.
Well, it sounds that, a lot of, I guess, insight or different approach has come out of, doing remotely that you find more beneficial, especially when you have, crowded rooms and, sometimes you want privacy, confidentiality, but, I think it's one of those things where you have, we used the word earlier before we came online, was navigate. We're going to have to start navigating different approaches, different, lines of doing the work. But how about you, for you, Gregory? Do you feel anything came out that you think, well, that should stay remotely because it's more beneficial for us?
Well, before the pandemic, we were seeing some of this already. When you show up for an expedited hearing, when you show up for a trial, there has to be a record, there has to be a court reporter. And several times I'd show up for trial in San Francisco, and the court reporter is phoning in because they didn't have a available court reporter at the San Francisco board that day, but maybe there was one in Los Angeles that was available. So we have this statewide system with huge disparities in cost of living and available, skilled labor force for the court system throughout the state. And some days you're going to have an incredibly packed calendar in Oakland and a really light calendar in San Jose. And for some of the hearings, maybe the court reporters and the judges in San Jose can telephonically pitch in, because ultimately it boils down to, you have these parties show up for a hearing. One of them is going to come away with some sort of benefit or avoiding paying a benefit. There's a dispute. Well, if we have to keep kicking it over, either the injured worker who might be entitled to some sort of medical benefits is now going to be delayed another few months because the board just didn't have the resources to hear the case, or maybe the defendant that should get an order to stop paying temporary disability benefits is going to have to keep bleeding out those benefits because their hearing can't be heard. But if we tap this, we can pool the resources of the statewide system so that you have these hearings move forward and get adjudicated faster, so that whichever side justice falls on, so that the justice can get done.
Wow. This is very interesting information. We're speaking to Andrew Trutanich and Gregory Grinberg from Gale Sutow and Associates, which takes me a segue to the next question is, Andrew, you are in Southern California. Gregory, you are in Northern California. Explain to us the difference. Is one more difficult, much easier than the other? North Cal, South Cal? Do you face the same type of, aggressiveness, or the same type of pool of judges? Or explain to us the pros and the cons of both sides of the state.
I mean, so I haven't spent a whole lot of time. I don't know, Greg, have you practiced much in Southern California? No, not at all.
A couple of walkthroughs, maybe. Yeah,
I've done a couple of things here and there in Northern California. I know that I've heard from people that Northern California doesn't have the same type of lien situation that we do in Southern California. So basically, when a claim is denied by the claims adjuster, then the applicant is free to go self-procure their treatment with a doctor, and they can then file a lien at the end of the case, and then they will have to resolve that lien at the end. It's not uncommon in Southern California for, especially on a denied case, after the case is over, it's resolved in whatever way, that, you have 5, 6, 7, 10 liens for self-procured treatment that you then have to deal with. And so we have, these lien conferences, these hearings that we go to. I have a lien conference tomorrow where I'm dealing with 4 different liens, on a case. And so we have a lot more of that. Greg, you could probably speak to how it actually works in Northern California, and why. I know that when, like going back to what we were just talking about, as far as like the overcrowding in the courtroom, a lot of that is because we have multiple parties that are coming together on lien conferences. So you'll have one case and maybe there's 6 different people that are representing different parties on that case. And it doesn't seem to be that way in Northern California. In fact, I remember going to the San Jose board for the first time after, only practicing in Southern California. And I got up there and there was so few people there. I was starting to wonder if like the board was closed or something. I'm like, where is everybody? But yeah, Greg, if you could probably speak to what the situation is with the like lien conferences and things in Northern California.
Yeah, we certainly get liens on occasion here, but there was a time when I was getting Northern California cases with Southern California applicants' attorneys, and the application would get filed, starting the claim, and immediately there would be 5 or 6 liens attached to the case, within a month of the date of injury. And all the lien claimants were in Southern California as well, but the injured worker, the employer, everything else was in the San Jose area or the Oakland area. And it was puzzling to me, because I imagine that that's something that happens regularly down south, but for the Northern California cases, we just don't have that. And one thing, and this for your viewers who might not be so familiar with this, one thing to remember about why liens are such an issue in California workers' comp is the strategy behind a lot of these is the cost of defending the case can sometimes, for a lien, specifically to fight off a lien, can sometimes exceed or drag out resolving the case more than what they're demanding. And so lien claimants bank on this mass volume, this kind of piranha strategy, that if there's enough liens and enough work to fight them off, that the employer, the insurer will just settle for some amounts, and they can, in volume, they can make a profit that way. So it's a situation that drags down these cases in Southern California a lot, from what I understand, and a little up here too, but not nearly as bad as Southern California cases.
Wow.
It's just the volume of attorneys and doctors and lien claimants down here. They're just like, it's also, the population is just so condensed in like the LA area. You have so many applicants, so many attorneys, so many doctors, that you just get more of everything.
That's interesting, but I think that the topic of liens and et cetera, we can probably have a whole different show about that one. There's a lot to talk about, right? But we're speaking to some of the 2 finest individuals, professionals, attorneys that represent Gale Sutow Associates. You know what? I'm going to give the website right now, just for those that are going to listen and view this later. It's to visit the website and get in contact with Gregory or Andrew or their offices in general, and to learn more about their services and their locations, because you guys have quite a few locations. But I believe the main corporate office is in Cypress, California, right, gentlemen? So people can call there, which is, the website is first, www.galesutow.com. That's GALESUTOW.com. And the phone number is area code 562-375-4353. It will all be down on the screen for you guys to take note and reach our offices to get more information. Now, let's talk about something else that I've been wanting to ask you, which I want to make mention that this is a very first edition of law and workers' comp for this podcast, and there was always a lot of questions, and believe it or not, a lot of people have requested, get somebody, attorneys, workers' comp, and law, we got to know more and learn more. But my question to you is, during this pandemic, and obviously we're not going to discuss, information or litigated claims or get into details, but just maybe on a percentage basis, or maybe just give us an idea of how or did any, claims regarding to COVID, did they increase? Did they rise? Did you guys see a lot of movement in that area regarding COVID?
Yeah, I mean, the COVID has changed, the situation for the employers completely, for all employers. We see a ton of COVID cases coming in, especially since, now here in California, the governor enacted a law that gives, a presumption to certain individuals that file COVID claims. So, our employers are seeing it a lot. I have a ton of COVID cases in my inventory, especially pre-vaccine, where people were getting really sick and dying, other people getting really sick and having lasting symptoms, but it's really caused just that liability that employers are now faced with, especially employers that are of the type of business that had to have people that were working all throughout, the early part of the pandemic. There's a lot of jobs out there, obviously, that you can't do remotely. You can't work in a warehouse remotely. You can't run a restaurant remotely, these types of things. And, it's really forced a lot of these employers, because of this liability, to rethink the way that they have to do things. They have to be flexible in terms of how they operate to make sure that their workers are safe, that, that they're not having an outbreak in their workforce, that type of thing.
And I'll give you an opportunity right now, Gregory, but, you talked about that law that the governor for California, it's presumed. And to me personally, I would say that it was very, I guess, unfair or unreasonable, for the reason that, I saw, because, where I work, and I personally dealt with all these cases where individuals, came from being, infected or exposed at the home or at a party or wherever, right? And then they come to the workplace and then they expose others. And the law says that it's just presumed, right, that it was just work. So it was difficult. That was a challenge for many, right? And it's one of those things where now you're in a workers' comp defense, and you have to somehow defend this. And I know you guys had to deal with this as well, but we had deaths. People died, with COVID. So it became very real. It became of real concern. And I can only imagine how many files came through your guys' office and your desks, regarding these type of claims. But tell us a little bit, Gregory, how was it up north? Because we know, and this is one thing, gentlemen, that I had a hard time with the entire pandemic. It was so uncharted waters. People were trying to navigate everything. And every agency in the world came up with their own rules. And that was it was frustrating, stressful, challenging, very discouraging at times, because where I work, the food industry, we have so many agencies that come and regulate the plant and the bakery and the restaurant side. They came up with their own rules, like, well, you need to wear a face shield, and you need to put dividers between employees. It's like everybody came with their own rules. And that's one of the things that I believe was one of the biggest challenges, was that it was very inconsistent. Everybody just created their own rules. They played their own game, and all the businesses had to, play on the rules. But Gregory, tell us a little bit, how was it up north in San Francisco? Because we know that's also an area that's been very aggressive.
Well, I've certainly had a few COVID cases, but so let me back up. When I was a kid, one of my favorite things to read about was the Greek myths, Hercules, Zeus, all of those. And there's one story that I've been thinking about, with all these pandemic regulations. It's the Scylla and Charybdis. this thing out in the ocean. There was this vortex that ships had to avoid if they get sucked into it and it would sink the ship. But then if they went too far away from it, there were all these jagged rocks and cliffs they would just crash into that were just under the waves. And they had to narrowly navigate between Scylla and Charybdis. Too far from one would push them into the other, and the ship would be destroyed. And that's what I've been thinking about, trying to navigate all these regulations and these presumptions now. Like Andy mentioned, Governor Newsom put out this executive order. It got codified by the legislature and turned into law. And basically, it says that, under certain categories, if you're a certain type of frontline worker, police officers, firefighters, nurses working in hospital facilities, or if you're in an outbreak scenario where a certain percentage of the workers in a particular location have gotten COVID, you're just presumed to have industrially caused COVID. And, normally if someone files a claim and says, oh, I hurt my back lifting something at work, well, the employer has 90 days to investigate and issue a denial. Well, that's tough enough already. Try getting a deposition within 90 days. Now, for the COVID presumptions, it's 45. You have 45 days to investigate and come up with a defense as to why the worker did not catch COVID at work. Otherwise, if the presumption applies, that's it, you're stuck with it.
Yeah.
Now, the main thing it's kind of an emerging issue. There's a recent Court of Appeals case from See's Candy, and it's been making its way around the news. But basically what happened is See's has this employee, and the employee gets COVID at work, and she goes home, and I think she gave it to her husband, and she's suing See's Candy because of what her husband suffered. And See's Candy says, whoa, this is workers' comp. You can't go into civil court and sue us for this. And she says, no, I'm not suing you for the COVID I suffered. You guys were negligent in giving it to me, and I gave it to my husband. And of course, it's tracking the asbestos cases. The asbestos cases from the California Supreme Court said, hey, if you work with asbestos and you come home and you hug your daughter and she gets asbestosis, that hug of death is a cause of action for your daughter to sue the employer, not just you.
Wow.
And you have these situations where you have a young, healthy worker gets COVID, is out for 2 weeks, back, seems fine. And the employer is put in this position thinking, you know what, why are we litigating this? They're fine, they're back to work, just pay them the 2 weeks off, accept the case and move on. Well, what about grandma? What about all the other people at home that might have gotten COVID now, and you've just admitted that you gave the worker COVID at work? So it's very, very tough navigating this, because this See's Candy case is the second case in this wave. The first case, and the name escapes me right now, went the other way and said, no, you don't have a cause of action for what your family member brought home from work. But See's Candy says you might. So what is an employer supposed to do? How are you supposed to effectively plan? How are you supposed to make sure you're properly insured? What measures you take at work? I mean, it's not just Northern California. We're dealing with it statewide, but your average employer, while they're dealing with all this, is actually trying to keep the lights on and keep people employed and do their actual regular business too.
Man, this is, I'm telling you guys, I think we need like a series of these episodes to talk about everything. There's just too much to discuss. That's good stuff, that's informative and educational for those companies that are still trying to figure out what to do with certain situations or cases. But man, Greg, thank you for sharing those examples of cases, because I'm sure it's more common than not that this is going on, right? So, but we're speaking to Andrew Trutanich and Gregory Grinberg from Gale Sutow Associates. Their website is www.galesutow.com. And the phone number to reach them is 562-375-4353. Their main office is in Cypress. Andrew's located there in Cypress, and Gregory is located up in San Mateo, California, in the beautiful San Francisco, the Bay Area, which, we got to visit soon, Gregory. And yes, Andrew, we have to make our way up there, Andy, and visit. But
I love San Francisco.
Yeah, right. And I want all of us to show our beautiful mugs that we have. Come on, gentlemen, let's promote this. So I'm doing it on purpose, Andrew.
As we talk, so I have that Candid Conversations mug, and I actually use it all the time. But I figured that you guys were both going to have yours. And I thought it'd be weird if we all three had it. So I have my Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry mug today.
You know what? It's getting a little cold in here. I think I just need to put
Oh
the
my-
sweater on real quick. Sorry, just warm up. It's still winter.
That is amazing, and and Andy always has to be the difficult one, and he always has to be the
I know.
different one and have the different mug. But gentlemen, I want to thank you for your time, and I was serious. We have to have other episodes as well because there's a lot of information to discuss. I met you guys last year in the conference in Dana Point. And I was really intrigued and attracted by your genuine, character and personality to just create relationships. You had an amazing booth set up, and you just wanted to meet people, network. We connected, and it was great. So I want to thank you for being on this program. I think this information is valuable and it's extremely needed. And I think we will have more episodes as a follow-up to discuss a lot of the other things that are going on in the law world. So any last words, Andrew, that you would like to share?
No, just thank you for having us on. I'm glad we finally got to do it. And if you ever want to have us back again, we'd be happy to do it.
Thank you so much. And then Gregory.
Thank you again. It was fun. It was a pleasure. And yeah, by all means, if you'd like us back, we'd love to come on. This was great.
You've been watching another episode of A Candid Conversation with Adam Lopez, and this was the Law Edition Workers' Comp Defense. I want to invite you to keep subscribing, keep supporting this podcast. We're going to continue to bring important information, relevant information, valuable information, such as this episode on the workers' comp defense and what's going on in the world of claims, COVID cases, and how we're navigating, and how they're, attorneys like Andrew and Gregory are adapting to the remote hearings and trials and depositions. So a lot of good stuff coming up. So continue listening, stay tuned, and until next time, and have a great, great week.
Sponsored in part by Todd Olivas and Associates. Todd Olivas and Associates, offering the best in the industry court reporting services. With physical offices throughout all of California, Todd Olivas and Associates also provides freelance court reporters and interpreters in many major U.S. cities such as Atlanta, Chicago, Denver, New York, Phoenix, among others. Located in beautiful Murrieta, California, their corporate headquarters are located at 29995 Technology Drive, Suite 205. They can be reached by telephone at 888-566-0253. And you can also visit their website at www.toddolivas.com. Todd Olivas and Associates. Quality transcripts on time. We connect the dots. We meet your target. Todd Olivas and Associates. Thank you for your partnership and sponsorship.